What makes that special bottle of bubbly pop? It's a sound known the world over, often signifying a good time is about to be had. Sparkling wine is delicious and satisfying to sip, but have you ever wondered how the bubbles get in the bottle? While some cheaper wines can be carbonated like a soda, good sparkling wines are actually way more involved and complicated than that. Welcome to Hourglass of Wine. I'm Jacqueline, looking to pour you a little wine knowledge from our glass to yours. At the absolute most basic level of knowledge, sparkling wine gets its bubbles from carbon dioxide or CO2. As you may remember from our video on how to make wine, which I'll have linked after this in case you need a refresher, alcoholic fermentation happens when yeasts present in the grape juice eat sugars that are also present. They will excrete alcohol and CO2. This CO2 is what, when we open a sparkling wine at our parties, is slowly released, causing the pretty bubbles that we see in our glasses. So if CO2 is created as a byproduct of all fermentation, why isn't all wine sparkling? Well, you see, the CO2 must be dissolved and stay dissolved in the wine. While CO2 is easily dissolved, it does require quite a bit of pressure to make that happen. Otherwise, it'll just escape. In still winemaking, the CO2 is allowed to escape in open containers. To make a sparkling wine, winemakers must find a way to trap the gas in some way, and thus the ensuing pressure will build up and dissolve the CO2 in the wine, creating the bubbles. But here is where things will diverge in the world of sparkling wine. This pressure and gas can be caught and maintained in different ways and for different effects, and honestly, different labor costs too. Today, we are going to talk about some of the most common ones, the traditional method and the Charmat method. And stick around to the end of the video for two specialized methods as well. First up, we're going to take the traditional method, also known as the champagne method or the classic method. This is the way that, as the names suggest, traditional champagnes are made. It's a very complex system with a lot of moving parts, and it honestly warrants a whole video in and of itself. So make sure to leave a like below and subscribe and comment to let us know if you really do want to see that more in-depth look. Today, let's just look high-level basic information. In the traditional method, grape juice is first fermented completely until it is a good old-fashioned normal still wine. Then it's going to be mixed with a little extra yeast and sugar and bottled. Just like in the first fermentation, the yeast will eat this extra sugar and start to re-ferment, causing the desired CO2. But now, the bottles are sealed with what is called a crown cap. It looks kind of like a bigger, beefier beer bottle cap. This will keep the gas from escaping and create the necessary pressure for the CO2 to dissolve. And I mean a lot of pressure. These bottles can actually be dangerous, and when workers have to handle them, they will often wear hard hats and protective material. But eventually, the yeast will eat all of the sugar and they will die. But being still trapped in the bottle, how can we get them out without having to lose all the CO2 bubbles in the wine? A winemaker will slowly rotate and turn the bottles from lying sideways to being completely vertical upside down. This will be done slowly over the course of hours and days to help the yeast slide and slip down until they are in the cap and the neck of the bottle. Once all the yeast is down in the point, the necks are flash frozen and the bottles will be opened. The pressure from the CO2 will spit out the frozen chunk of dead yeast, and a little bit more sparkling wine is quickly added to top off any liquid that was lost during this process. Then the bottle is going to be sealed with that traditional sparkling wine cork, the big fat one, and cage, as you will recognize in any traditional method wine. There is a shortcut to this whole method that is known as the transfer method. The wine will be re-fermented in the bottle just like the traditional method, but rather than taking the time to slowly turn the bottles and get them into the bottle neck, the wine will be emptied into a pressurized vat. It will be then filtered to remove the yeasts and then bottled under pressure from there. Moving on to famous sparkling wine method number 2 is a slightly easier way, the Charmat method. Also known as Metodo Martinotti and the tank method, this is a method that was invented in Italy for wines like Prosecco. Here, rather than our second fermentation happening in a bottle like with the traditional method, it actually happens in a pressurized stainless steel tank. This tank will trap the CO2 and dissolve it, and when it is completely re-fermented, it will be filtered and bottled under pressure. The biggest difference in the finished product between these two methods has to do with those extra dead yeasts. In the traditional method, they are left in the bottles in contact with relatively little product for extended periods of time, and this can impart certain extra complexities and aromas. In the Charmat method, rather, the wine doesn't spend a whole lot of time in contact with these dead yeasts, meaning we end up with a wine that is much fresher and lighter. All right, let's quickly look at some of our special cases. Our first one is going to be the Asti method, used to make Asti Spumante and Moscato d'Asti, or sweet sparkling wines. A method similar to the tank or Charmat method is used, but we do it here with our primary fermentation. Basically, grape juice is loaded into a pressurized tank and is left to start fermenting. The CO2 produced is trapped and dissolved, but then fermentation is halted partway through. This is so that not all of the sugar is used up. The product is filtered to remove the still live yeast, and it is bottled. This leaves a product that is bubbly, yet still has some of the original sugar left, so it's sweet. For our last method is the ancestral method. Sometimes when wines are made with this method, we can see them labeled as pet nat or pétillant natural. To really simplify this method, it's like a traditional method wine, but the yeast never gets removed. The wine is bottled with sugar and yeast and left to re-ferment with those beer bottle caps, and then it's aged in the bottle and sold as is, often with those beer bottle caps still in place. Now, this does mean that the style of wine will appear cloudy, and when the bottle has been still for a long period of time, you might see a buildup of kind of a dusty looking sediment that will actually sit on the bottom, and those are the dead yeasts. It's not a fault in this type of wine, but rather a characteristic. Because these wines keep their yeast for potentially such a long time, it means that they can actually get really interesting flavors that your average traditional method wine might not develop. All right, there is your foundation to help you decipher some different ways sparkling wines can be made. Do you have a favorite method for sparkling wines that you prefer? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like below and make sure to subscribe because we have a lot more foundational wine knowledge that is planned and coming up. In the meantime, here's the promised recap on how wine is made to check out, and I will see you with the next glass. Bye.